Hi there, Ray here, today with another video, and in today's video we are going to talk about Sony, more specifically Sony PlayStation 3, Sony PlayStation 4 and Sony PlayStation 5. If you don't have a Sony PlayStation and you are thinking of getting one but you don't know which one, then this is the guide for you. In this video we are going to talk about price, after that we will take a look at performance, and in my opinion most importantly we will take a look at how they perform in real life. So if you have one of those questions, then you are in the right place, because we are going to talk about those things and a lot more. So don't leave, and let's begin with the video. And what better place to start than with the Sony PlayStation 3? And when it comes to price, it is the cheapest, and of course it would be the cheapest. After all, it is the oldest. Actually, the most interesting thing about the PS3 is the controller. An original Sony PlayStation 3 controller is actually more expensive than the PS4 controller, even though the PS4 controller is compatible with the PS3. So if you ever need a PS3 controller, just remember, maybe the PS4 controller is better. It is cheaper, and it is better. Well, it should be better since it is newer. But now let's talk about price. And the first thing you should know when talking about price is that there are no new Sony PlayStation 3 available. Or maybe there are, but those are expensive and they are not worth buying. So realistically you will be getting a used PS3. Now I will be honest with you, I bought a PS3 a couple of days ago and those consoles are cheap. I got a PS3 with 2 controllers for $90. But the PS3 has a trick that the PS4 and the PS5 don't have, and that is games. And now you might say, what do you mean games? You can play more games and they will run better on PS5. And you would be right, but I don't mean it on that way. What I mean when I say you have games, I mean there are a lot of games already installed on the PS3. Right now on my PS3 I have a lot of games. I don't even know how many games I have, but there are well over 20 games. And all of those games are games that normally would cost money. Now there are some disadvantages. When it comes to playing those games online with friends, that will be a problem. But if you are someone who wants to get into variety gaming, if you are someone who wants to play some old, but really good games and don't want to pay $30 for each of those games, and if you are someone who doesn't want to spend a lot of money on a console, but still wants to be able to play a lot of games on that console, then the PS3 might just be the console that you want. And now let's move on to the PS4. Now I know this will be interesting to you and you might not have guessed it, but the PS4 is more expensive than the PS3, but it is cheaper than the PS5. But now what do you get when you buy a PS4? And by saying what do you get when you buy a PS4, I mean what does the PS4 provide? What is it better at compared to the PS3? And you might have guessed it, the PS4 is better at every way possible. It is more powerful, it runs games better, games run at a higher resolution, games run at a higher frame rate. Everything in the PS4 is a couple steps ahead of the PS3. And of course, since it is a much newer console, when it comes to playing online games, you will have no problem playing your favorite games with your friends. So it has all of these benefits, but it doesn't have anything else. And do you remember when I said that you will buy the PS3 used? Well, the same can be said about the PS4, and if you want to get a good deal, well, you will spend over $200 when you buy a PS4. And the thing that is interesting is that when you buy a PS4 you will not have it filled with games, so keep that in mind. I guess when people upgraded from the PS4 to the PS5 they transferred the games to it, and that makes sense. You wouldn't want your games to be gone. Why sell the console with games in it when they increase the value of the console just by a couple of dollars? In the PS3 this wasn't the case, because you cannot transfer the games, so people just kept their games in it, and when they sell the console they sell the console with the games, because why not? So keep that in mind. When you buy a console you might get it with a couple of games in it, but I wouldn't keep my hopes up. Realistically you will buy your own games. And when you buy like 10 games, well, the price goes up by a lot, so keep that in mind. But like I said, if you just want to play games with your friends, for example Fortnite or maybe Apex Legends, well, things here get a bit more interesting, because this console can run those games, and it runs those games good, and the PS3 cannot do that. So compared to the PS3, if you want to play with your friends online, then we have a clear winner. Just get a PS4. But now let's move on to the PS5. And what I am about to tell you will blow your mind. When it comes to price, this is the most expensive out of the three. I am just kidding, everyone knows that. But do you know why it is the most expensive? It is the newest. I guess everyone knows that too. But now, keeping the jokes aside, this console has the most performance. This console is the best Sony has to offer when it comes to gaming consoles. So why would you want to get a PS5 console over the PS4, or even the PS3? And there are many reasons. Well, it depends on your budget. Like I said, The PS5 is the most expensive out of these consoles, so it will set you back around $500 or more depending on where you are and what console version you get, but it offers a lot and it does not offer that much. So when it comes to games, like I said, since it is a lot better, it will run games a lot smoother. So if it's so much better, why would you want to buy a PS3 or a PS4? Well, to no one's surprise, it is the money. If you want to save some money, you will get one or the other. Because let's be honest, even though the PS4 can play all the new games you want right now, when it comes to newer games that will be harder, it will not be able to keep up, and even if it somehow manages to play newer titles, well, it will run them at a lower frame rate, and not at the best details, so you will pay full price for a game, and you will not be able to enjoy it to the fullest. That is not ideal. So like I said, if you want to casually play online games with friends, the PS4 is good enough. But if you have the money and want to enjoy the game to the fullest, then the PS4 will not cut it. You will not want a PS4, and there is one more benefit to getting a PS5. You will get a PS5 new. I mean, the PS5 just launched a couple years ago, so it is new. I mean, it is not new, because it launched a couple years ago, but compared to a console's lifespan, it is new. Companies don't come with new console versions often. It's not like phones, where you get a new model every year, so they are still making these. And if you are thinking of getting one used, just don't. I mean, if you want a PS3, you can get one because people want to get rid of them. If you get a PS4, people might be upgrading. But if someone sells a PS5, it has some kind of problem. I mean, you might get lucky, but still, even used, they are not cheap. Right now, PS5 prices dropped. Scalpers are not at this space, thank God. So right now it is a good time to buy a PS5. But like I said, the PS5 has a lot of performance, and I will get into that. But before I talk about the PS5 performance, let's take a look at the PS3 and the PS4. So what kind of performance does the PS3 have? So if you look it up, the PS3 can output images at 1080p at 60 frames per second. That means that it runs games at full high definition, at 60 frames per second. And believe me, that is an awesome experience. But it is an experience that the PS3 does not give you. So what do I mean by that? First, the image is 720p, it is upscaled, so actually it gets a worse image and makes it look sharper. And when it comes to 60 frames per second, well, it depends on the game, and don't get me wrong, you will play games and have fun, and games will run smooth, because all games were tested. So if you have a game, know this, that game was tested, so it will run smooth. It is just not as smooth as they say, but you will enjoy every second you spend on that console, and the images look sharp. Like I said, I got a PS3 and I'm having a lot of fun. Just don't accept a miracle, that is all I'm saying. And with that said, let's move on to the PS4. And here we have 1080p or full high definition, and 60 frames per second, which is the same. The only difference is that here games actually run at that resolution and at that frame rate. And yeah, of course, newer titles will not run that smooth, but you will generally be able to get something closer to that number. And yeah, I know that the PS4 Pro supports 4K, but don't get your hopes up. It will not run games at that resolution, at least not games that are worth playing. The console just doesn't have that much performance. There are other more interesting things about the PS4 console when it comes to performance, but they are not as interesting, so I will not mention them. And now let's move on to the newest console, the pride of Sony, the PS5. And here we have 4K at 120 frames per second. This is a big difference. This is a game changer. This is truly a great experience. And again, this is an experience Sony simply cannot give you. Yeah, it cannot do that. I mean, it can do both of those things. So don't get me wrong. But realistically, you will have to choose one or the other. What do I mean by saying that? Well, to simply put it, the PS5 has a lot of performance. It just does not have that much performance. So if you want frames per second, if you want 120 frames per second, then you will need to settle for 1080p. That is a fact. But if you want 4K, if you want that clean and sharp image, then you will need to settle for 60 frames per second. And in most cases, you will need to settle for even 30 frames per second, so you will not have that much frames per second. But you still have that choice, and still it has a lot more performance than the PS4, so just know that you will decide what you want, and you will have to give something to get something. There will be a choice. And before you get angry, I know there are games that run at 4K and in 120 frames per second, but those are not games that you would be playing for long, and those are not as good as new games. So when it comes to new games, don't keep your hopes high. Just some older games that are easier to run will be able to take full advantage of 4K and 120 frames per second. But for newer games that you will want to play more, both 4K and 120 frames per second just will not be possible, but even though it cannot do both, it is a lot more powerful than the PS4. When it comes to games that the PS4 struggles to make 30 frames per second, the PS5 will be able to reach close to 120 frames per second with the same resolution, so keep that in mind. It is still a beast when it comes to performance, and now let's actually see what they can do when it comes to real life. I mean, on paper the PS5 is 30 times better than the PS3, but in real life how do they compare, and how does the PS4 fit into that? Well, let's start with the console that is 30 times better than the PS3, and that is the PS5. Let's start from the top, and when it comes to real life gameplay, well, the PS5 is praised a lot. People say it is the best console. People say that it doesn't stutter or lose frame rates, and everything you have heard is true. Is all that and more, so you will not be regretting anything for choosing this console. So it is the best and it performs like it. You can see gameplay from a PS5 and you will not be disappointed with its performance. And rest easy, all the new games will run on that console without any problems. They will be smooth, they will look great. Just keep in mind, like I said, not as good as Sony has advertised. So the real life performance is awesome. And now let's move on to the PS4, and this is the middle. And since this is in the middle, you might think this is the best of both worlds, and you would be mistaken. This is actually the worst of both worlds. I mean, in the PS3 you have the games available. Here you either buy the games or play the free games that are available. But that's not all. I mean, let's face it, when it comes to newer games the PS4 isn't as good as it used to be. Newer games are more demanding, so they will not run as smooth. The PS4 just is not capable of keeping up, and there are really good and fun games on the PS4, but you will have to buy those games, and if you want to spend that much money on games, then you might as well spend some more money on a PS5 and just enjoy that. It will be a better experience, and it will run games for a lot more years compared to the PS4. And now let's see the PS3, and well, it is the worst when it comes to performance. It is 30 times worse than the PS5 when it comes to performance. But it actually is not as bad as you might think. Look, when games were made, they were made for the PS3. They were optimized to run on the PS3. So all the games you have installed, they will run perfectly. Even GTA 5 looks incredible on PS3. And I know it is an old game and most games on PS3 are old, but let's be honest with ourselves. They are still really good games, even when it comes to the video quality, the storytelling, the mechanics. Everything about those games is good. So if you want to play some games from time to time and just enjoy yourself, then this console is still a pretty good console. And now let's just compare them. Why would you want to buy one over the other? And like I already said, if you want to have fun playing some games, and don't want to spend over $100, well, then the PS3 is a good choice. But if you are a casual gamer and if you want to play games with your friends, then the PS4 is a pretty good deal. I mean, since you cannot play those games on a PS4, then this is a no-brainer, and for $250. It is not that bad. And then if you don't want to compromise and if you are willing to spend more money on a console to have fun on it, well, then just buy a PS5 and you will not regret it. And with that said, I am about to end this video, so if you want to add something or if there is something important I have not mentioned, let me know in the comments down below. And don't forget to like if you like this video, if you didn't dislike. But if you want to see more videos like this or more tech-related videos, then don't forget to subscribe so you get notified when new videos comes out. This was Ray, and I will catch you in the next one.